the shared copy with that was shared with us, or?
You want your document first. So again, going back to your notes from your Google Classroom, the document that's titled "Let's Talk About Literature." You want your own, but you do want to be able to share your document with multiple people. Multiple people have shared theirs with you, but you want to be on your own document today because you're going to take your own notes. The reason you're sharing those documents and receiving shared documents is so that you can compare your notes, you can add notes. I want a full spectrum of answers throughout this whole process. I don't want just your answers, and I don't want you to limit yourself only to what your experience is. I want you to be able to have a wide range of experiences in these answers. Yes, ma'am? Yeah, unsubmitted. Don't turn it in for a long time. I'm going to change that date so it's going to not show missing on your page. I'll change that due date, so we'll get to that eventually. Ethan, where's your computer? Mm-hmm. All right, so is everybody with me?
Yeah, Mr. Kimble, we're with you.
All right, very good. All right, making sure. You have the 8 questions. So I'm going to start on this side as a kind of review before we go forward. Those 8 questions really dealt with these 2 main ones. What entertains us, and there's variations of that. Like, what do we like to read? What do we not like to read? Why do we read? Why don't we read? We had all those questions, right? So some of the answers, let me just give you some of the answers, and you make sure that somewhere in your notes you have some of these things. We talked about nonfiction. Some people really like nonfiction. They like true stories. They like history. They like biographies, like to study individual people or time periods. We have people that like fiction and different variations of fiction, including historical fiction, which kind of blends the real stuff with the fake stuff. And then we have everything from science fiction to dystopian novels to mystery to thrillers. Like, we have that whole list. And hopefully in your shared notes you have a combined thing. So it's not just your answer, it's the collective. Like, the whole class likes these things. Okay? In addition to that, some of the negatives, like why we don't read, we talk about the lack of focus, we talk about the lack of interest, we talk about sometimes we don't connect with material that is forced upon us. I'll talk about that required reading here in just a couple of moments and some bigger viewpoints that I have of that. Entertainment factor, some of us like the scare factor, some of us like the blood and guts, some of us like comedy, various ways to present humor. We like humorous types of things. We like things that relate to us. So in your answers, make sure you have some of those things in your answers. The second big idea that those questions try to address is, what does it mean to be human? What are our needs? What do we desire? What are our experiences that are common throughout all of human history and our experiences in the classroom? So we talked about the 4 big things. Essentially, as humans, we need food, including water, including apple cider vinegar sometimes to keep us clean. I'm saying that because we just had that conversation. We need food, we need shelter, protection. We have a desire for relationships, some kind of interaction, that desire to be accepted, to belong, okay? So the relationship aspect. And then a lot of my classes had conversation with number 4, which is about your beliefs, that expression of beliefs. For some of you in the room, that is a very faith-based answer. For some of you, it's just what you value as right or wrong, things you like to do, things you don't like to do, but you believe certain things. You act on those beliefs, and as you get older, you start to share those beliefs, possibly with your children or the people that you have influence over. Okay, so 4 things that I talk about: food, shelter, relationships, beliefs are some of the things that make us human. The variations of those answers is what separates us from a lot of the other creatures on this planet. When we talk about experiences, then we throw in the emotional side. What are some of our common experiences that we have? We have the full range. We are going to experience both the positive, the joy, the celebrations, the happiness. We're going to experience those in our lives, and we're also going to experience at some level the sadness, the loss, the depression, the anxiety. And throughout our days, we're going to be somewhere in the middle of all of that. And we're going to experience a lot of that throughout our spectrum. There's going to be days where we're really, really good. There's going to be days that we're not so good. Sometimes we're going to be right in the middle. But our whole range of human experiences, our human emotions, really provide a common bond because we all go through it. Okay, and that's what we're really trying to get into, is what are some of the things that we can learn from literature. Before I talk about this in detail, let me kind of pause and give you a little rabbit trail conversation. I want to make sure that we have an understanding of what I think this whole high school experience is about. And part of the reason why I'm recording this is because I want to make sure that this gets recorded accurately so I don't have somebody going around and twisting it, okay? The high school experience, for me, what I think it is for high school students, it's an opportunity for you to develop habits in your life. Because you repeatedly do things, and when you repeatedly do things, that becomes a habit. So you're developing habits in your life, and those habits, specifically for the high school experience, it's how do you manage a multifaceted life. You have to handle 5, 6, some of you 7 classes. How do you handle all of that simultaneously and be successful in that process? You develop those habits. Sometimes your classes can be really easy. Sometimes your classes can be very difficult. So how do you handle that? How do you handle the moments when it's really easy and you have to navigate through the easy things but still maintain a high focus on the things that might be a little bit difficult at the same time? Fast forward, and I'll give you a personal example. This morning whenever I woke up, I woke up as a husband. My wife was laying in bed with me. I started as a husband. 15 minutes later, I get to see my youngest son, who's getting ready to go to work, so I become a father. As I get ready and walk out the door, I become a teacher. Sometimes whenever I leave this building in the afternoon, I am either a coach or a referee or a friend. There's lots of different roles that I play, and sometimes those interact. Okay? Sometimes I have been that friend that someone's called me up and something's going on really heavy in their lives and they just need help, they need support, they need advice, they need whatever. Sometimes it's my own children that call me up in the middle of the day, hey Dad, I've got a question for you, can you call me at lunch or can you answer this? Like my oldest son is just going through the possibility of moving, so there was some advice that he needed, some not only financial advice, but how to deal with lawyers and things like that he might have had to get involved with because of some lease situations. Anyway, sometimes you have to do a lot of things at the same time. But imagine if I woke up, let's say tomorrow morning, and I just don't feel like being a husband. Like maybe something happens and tomorrow morning I just wake up, I'm like, you know what, today, maybe tomorrow, but today, I'm just done. I'm not going to be a husband. Or it's 7:45 and I'm supposed to be walking out the door to do my morning duty over there and I'm just still in my pajamas and I'm just like, teaching, forget it. I just don't feel like going. I'm not even going to call them. They'll figure it out. Will that be beneficial to my life? Because it's an expectation that I'm supposed to do certain things, right? Whether I feel like doing it or not, I still have to do it. Whether I feel like being a husband or not, I still have to be a husband. If I want to maintain that relationship long term. If I want to maintain a teacher, to be a teacher, I have to do the things that teaching requires me to do, even if I don't feel like it. Okay? When I have those moments whenever my kids are asking for advice, or I have friends that are seeking advice or comfort or whatever they need, whenever they call me on the phone, I can't just say, you know what, today is not your day. I'm just not going to be your father today, so see ya. Or, I'm not going to be your friend. I'm sorry, you just found out your dad has cancer and he's going to die within the next 6 months. Sorry, I'm just not your friend today. What I'm getting at is, as an adult, you do lots of things at the same time, and you figure out how to be successful in all of those things. As children, you guys don't like me using that word children, but you're still in that learning how to handle life. You're still growing into your adult part of your life. You're developing habits. So whenever things get difficult in classes, are you developing the habit of, this is too hard, so I'm just going to check out today? It's in the realm of possibility. You can do that, just like I could check out being a husband, I could check out being a father, I could check out being a teacher, I could check out being a friend. But is that really beneficial to my long-term success, the things that I really want to accomplish? Not at all, right? I think you all would agree that that's not something you would want to do. You are developing habits. When things get difficult, like the material we're about to read, it is going to be difficult. I'm telling you on the front end, this is not one of those moments where this is going to be an easy cakewalk through this material. The language is difficult. The content is different. The fact that it's over 300 years, for some of you, that's a block. Bless you. You're going to have to figure out how to handle something that's difficult and still be successful with it. And then you move on to another class, just like you came from another class. Okay? You're going to have to handle this multifaceted world. So what am I asking you to get out of this difficult process? Connections. One of our main goals is to find the connections between what we are reading and our own lives. You know, with me, Mr. Kimble, that's one of my main focal points in everything that I do is, how do we relate to it? How can it make us a better person? What can we gravitate towards, or what can we start to avoid? We can learn from the characters. We can learn how they handle relationships in their lives, and we can learn how they handle circumstances that they are in. To be a little bit more specific, anybody dealt with loss? Anybody have someone in their family that you just can't stand? Like angry, like ticked off, right? Maybe they have some baggage that they're trying to cover up and you know about it. Okay? Has anyone experienced, I have to be careful with how I say this, but I'm going to say it this way. Someone being fake in order to protect something in their life. You may kind of know about that. I'm not saying it's you, but you kind of know that that happens. Some people are deliberately fake because they have to protect something. For some of you, it's because you've been through some trauma, and you kind of have to fake the smile. You have to put on that mask, you know that analogy, you put on that mask to hide the things that you're really going through, right? Some of you do that, okay? One of our main characters, absolutely, okay? Anybody have really close friends that you've had in your life, and then they do something to kind of stab you in the back, and you literally have to break from that friendship and move on with your life? Anybody ever have to do that? This is going to be a part of Hamlet. So what I'm trying to get you to understand is, yes, difficult, old material, but there are things that are part of the human experience that we're going to read about. We're going to learn how Hamlet dealt with some of those things. We're going to learn here in just a couple of moments, whenever I switch into Shakespeare's specific material, we're going to learn what that audience in Shakespeare's time was really interested in, and we're going to find out they're really not that different than us. So things really haven't changed. What has changed? One of the questions on your list, language. We need to be aware of one of the things that makes this difficult is the fact that it is very, very old English type of language. Okay, let's switch our mode. You're staying in the document. This document is going to grow and grow and grow. We're going to get into Shakespeare-specific material right now, and then in a couple of moments, if we can, we're going to try to get into Hamlet-specific material. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background on Hamlet. But we'll start with Shakespeare. Shakespeare. Does anybody know when he was born?
Wasn't his birthday on the same day he died?
Yep.
That's all I
Do you remember what that date was?
Nope.
It's debatable. We're not 100% sure on his birth date because all we have really is his baptism records, and that's usually within a few days, within a week or so of him being born. 1564. Thank you, Macy. Do you have the month? Do you have the day? Some people debate it's either the 22nd, 23rd, or 24th. I gravitate towards the 24th because that's my birthday, but most common you're going to see April 23rd. So let's go ahead and put April 23rd. of 1564. And then Zeke is absolutely correct. He did pass away on the same date. Well, let me be consistent on how I'm writing my notes here. April 23rd, 1616 is whenever he passes away. Now, as I do some of these notes, this is one of those teaching techniques that I personally don't like. I don't like to lecture and make you just take notes, but this is kind of what today is. I'm gonna say a lot of things, and you just need to be typing some of the things that I say, because I'm gonna fill in some, or you're going to fill in some of these gaps. So between his birth and death, he does marry a woman by the name of Anne Hathaway. A-N-N-E, Hathaway, H-A-T-H-A-W-A-Y. Married her. They do have 3 children together. When they got married, he was 18. She was 26. She's a cougar. 26. That was a little sketchy at the time, okay? I don't want to bore you with a lot of the economy, political, faith-based things. I want to get right into kind of his professional life because that's more interesting to us at this point. So we're going to start about his professional life, which he was heavily involved in the theater, obviously. Okay. First thing you need to know is there is a date that I'm going to give you verbally. He was a stockholder in a group of men. This is a group of actors called Lord Chamberlain's Men. C-H-A-M-B-E-R-L-A-I-N. Lord Chamberlain's Men. He becomes a stockholder, which means he's financially invested in this, not only as an actor, but as a writer in 1594. When he becomes very popular. Lord Chamberlain's Men, as they compete with other people in their community that are also actors. There's other plays besides just the Globe Theater. There's other theaters that are out there. But Lord Chamberlain's Men become somewhat popular. People like them. People gravitate towards them. When we talk about the audience in just a little bit, we'll talk about when they actually went to the plays and things like that, because that's kind of interesting. But in a certain year, 1603, that group of men were purchased by the king and had their legal stamp of approval from the king, and they were renamed the King's Men. Does anyone know which king of England would have purchased Lord Chamberlain's Men and renamed them the King's Men?
George.
Well, you can shout out names, or you can open up a new tab, hit a few buttons, and then give me a correct answer. Or you can open up that tab, and you can type in a few letters.
Henry Carey.
In 1603?
Yeah.
Henry Carey. James. First.
James. Anybody heard of King James?
Stewart. That's his last name.
Anybody heard of King James? What do you know King James for?
The king of 16.
The Bible. Okay? Thank you. Because this is important, because it provides a cultural connection here, and it's a little bit important to you all. What you need to understand is somewhere in 1570s, 1560s, England starts to focus more on the arts than it does on war and conquering. Okay, so there's like a period where it's not as much of a battleground. They're not always preparing for war. They have longer periods of peace. And whenever there are periods of peace, what do we turn our attention to? Arts and creativity, right? So whether that's theater, whether that's painting, whether that's sculptures, whether that's buildings, We focus our attention on the creative things. And King James, whenever he comes to power, he's very much in tune with what the people want and what they need. Which is why he starts going to the theater, eventually watches Romeo and Juliet, and because Romeo and Juliet was a cultural phenomenon at the time, he ends up purchasing that group of men in 1603. What's relevant to that, there's that connection of people in the royal circles starting to get a little bit more involved with their upper middle class and middle class types of people that they are actually ruling over. So let me talk about that for just a little bit. So in the 1500s, early 1500s, and for time periods, generations, centuries before, all of the literature focused on royalty. You have the knights. You have things like Beowulf and Sir Gawain of the Green Knight, and you have all of your Lancelot types of stories. It's all about the upper echelon, the upper levels of society. All the stories about the king that's a ruler, but the knights are fighting for the honor of the princess, or they're fighting to win the favor of the princess so they can get into that upper level status, right? In the 1570s-ish, things start to get more focused on the common people. But the common people are not educated. They can't read, they can't write. But they do have lives that are interesting. So we start to find stories that are somewhat interesting to the common people, like Romeo and Juliet, like Macbeth, like Hamlet, like the things we're getting ready to get into. King James, as he's paying attention to the needs of what the people want, and this is just a little side note, 1611 is whenever he institutes the decree to have the Bible, which would be the main source of education. Would you agree? They don't write books just for the sake of books. That's not as popular in this time period yet. The Bible is one of those things that not only can it support the faith, but it can also be the document that people can start to read and be educated, and it can do both things, right? They can simultaneously increase their faith and understand what is going on and learn how to read and write. 1611, he has the Latin version of the Bible, which is called the Vulgate, Vulgate, if you want that, translated into English, which is why we have the King James version of the Bible.
Latin version.
Latin version is called the Vulgate, Vul. That's the Latin version. It's called the Vulgate. He has that change translated into English. Now, doesn't mean he was a man of faith. He's really not. But it does mean that he's kind of paying attention to the needs of the people. Now, in this time period, how many of you, this is why I started to make that connection to Romeo and Juliet. How many of you remember Romeo and Juliet? You went through it, right? Okay. Did you guys get the fact that Shakespeare's kind of slapping the church in the face with the priest? At the end of it, the priest has to give confession. It's the priest. Did I go through this already with you guys in the past? Where the priest was involved in every bit of this chaos that Romeo and Juliet is, and whenever the families show up at the catacombs and the 3-4 people are dead, the priest has to say, my fault, sorry, I was aware of all of it. The priest has to give a confession. There's a huge slap of irony there. Quickly. Staging, it's like an open courtyard. There is no ceiling, okay? It's a slanted stage, slanting down, so higher in the back, lower in the front. Open everywhere, there are no curtains. So all of your scene changes are done right in front of you. So I'm talking about staging. The theater that he would have been performing in and writing for. Open stage, open ceiling. It's got 2, maybe 3, sometimes 4 levels, but it's all open as far as the top. Performers were all male. It was illegal for women to perform. Okay, so all the performers, even the female parts, so that includes the sex scenes, that includes the kissing scenes, that includes anything that's female, was played by a male. And we'll talk about how they actually did things, because they didn't actually, like we're so used to watching movies where it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what they're doing, because there is no imagination. There's lots of imagination here, so there are liberties, there are things that they wouldn't do, but it's implied, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more tomorrow. Let's talk quickly about audience interest. So the audience of the 16th century, what are they interested in? I'm going to give you a list, and you just kind of create that quick list. Action and excitement. They wanted their action to be gory, G-O-R-Y, which means they like blood and guts. They like it to be somewhat on the gross end of the spectrum. Since the majority of the people could not read or write, they are very interested into the music of language. The music of language. Make sure you say it that way. The music of language. That means it has to sound appealing. You have to be creative in how you say the words on the stage. Which means, so right underneath that, which means they like poetry. Which is why you guys are familiar with Romeo and Juliet. There are entire scenes, entire acts that are just dynamic pentameter, right? Every line rhymes and it's got a certain flow to it. Like there's a big scene in Romeo and Juliet that does that. He's doing that on purpose. They liked puns. And they like a lot of wordplay. That's all underneath that music of good language. But what does that mean? Poetry. It means puns. It means wordplay. Anything that you're doing creatively with the words that the actors are speaking, they like that. They also liked over-the-top action. This uses the word vigorous action. And they like boisterous humor. I've been paraphrasing that one as inappropriate humor. So let me remind you of Romeo and Juliet. If you remember that very first scene in Romeo and Juliet, you have the servants, Samson and Gregory, out in the town, and they're talking about how much they hate the other family's servants and family. And within the first 3 minutes, they're talking about, yeah, I would beat that family's dog. Oh yeah, I would rape her. There's a scene where he talks about, I would take my sword out and I would pin her against the wall. He's not talking about sword out of the dagger. Okay? It's very vulgar within the first couple of minutes, because what's Shakespeare trying to do? Get the audience's attention. And he does within the first scene. Okay? When the other family starts to show up in town, what happens? The servants start to... Come on, you guys remember Romeo and Juliet, the very first scene. The servants are mouthing each other. They end up doing what? Tybalt shows up in a rage, right? Don't they have a big sword fight? Before the sheriff comes out and he's like, all right, no more of this. You go meet at my house. You're going right now. If you guys fight again, someone's going to die. You guys remember that? But the opening scene is a fight scene. And not only is it a fight scene, those performers wouldn't have stayed on the stage. They would have been in the audience. And the audience would have been like pushing them around and hooping and hollering and all this kind of stuff. And they're swinging their play daggers, right? They're not real ones, but they're swinging their play daggers and swords. And they're out in the audience for probably 10 minutes before they work their way back up to the stage. They're causing a commotion. And that gets the audience's attention, because that's what they want. They want all the action. They want that boisterous over the top. So they got the humor, they got the wordplay, they got the action within the first 5 minutes of Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare was very good at that kind of writing. That's what they wanted. So if you have the interest of the audience, tell me, what do you have? Repeat that list. Action, excitement. Gory.
They wanted music of the language.
Music of the language, okay? What else? What does that mean? Poetry, fun, wordplay,
Excitement, over the top.
over the top excitement, and then inappropriate type of humor. Now, does that sound like things that you guys kind of like today?
Yeah.
No, really? I mean, come on. How many of you watch Saturday Night Live? That's almost all of that, right there, right? Okay, there's tons of things, I'm not gonna get into all of it. How much time do we have? Okay, so I am gonna pause there. Tomorrow, we'll get into the Hamlet-specific material.